This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Welcome everyone for today's webinar. So we'll first cover on what is new in 8.2 release. This was done about 3 to 4 months back. We make new releases every 3 to 4 months, and all of the features, bug fixes, enhancements, they're all based on community feedback. So we have different places where people can give feedback. One of them is the forums. So we recommend that everyone register and subscribe to our forums. It is forums.openspecimen.org. So this is a place we frequently publish things like release notes, new features, and also there are users posting their questions and so on. So please subscribe to this so that you're updated with any new happenings of OpenSpecimen. And we do have, of course, the support ticket systems. So all our clients who are working with us, submit their feedback over there. So based on different feedback we receive, we prioritize and make releases with new features, bug fixes, and usability enhancements. So to starting with the 8.2 features, let me just. The first one was that was fixed on priority was the security fixes. So there was a log4j vulnerability which was fixed, and also 2FA is now enabled, because of which you'll be now you can enable that at every instance. And how this would help you is when you log in, you can use a security code that appears on your phone, that you can use the Google Authenticator, and that will add an additional layer of security. So that can be enabled at every instance of OpenSpecimen now. And so the next feature is something called as user profile forms. So let us look at what that is now. So this is the public demo site I was talking about. If you do not have a login, you go to demo.openspecimen.org and you'll be able to sign up for your account. And this always has the latest released version. Right now, this has the 9.0 version. So if you see here, this has the 9.0 version. So if you want to look at any of the features that I show today or any of the new features before you upgrade your own instances, this would be the right place to come to. And so yeah, right now I've logged in and this is the home page. And sorry, just first give you a background of what I'm showing. We have a feature called custom forms. This is to extend the default data model. So when you install OpenSpecimen, it comes with certain data fields. Now you can extend it and add new fields at participant level, specimen level, and so on. So if you see, when you create a form, there are different levels of attachment, and one of them being so user forms and user profile forms. So user profile forms is what is added recently. So this is a form that you can add where users themselves can enter data for it. So this is useful for things like if you want them to enter some training details or other details that they want to enter. So if you go to the user profile and this is the forms that administrator can fill up, and this is the profile forms. So you can add new forms at the user profile level. Let me just show you an example of user form. So here, if you see, there is a training form which users can fill up. So right now this is attached at user level, but yeah, so this is something that users can enter on their own. So they can go to their profile and they can go to the profile forms here and enter that. So for users entering these profile forms, on the right side, if you see, you can access your own profile and you come to this page and you can enter this. So this is one of the features that got added in 8.2. The next feature is in the bulk import. So again, to give you some background about what bulk import is. So when you enter data or update data, you can, one is you can do it through the user interface, that is manually entering one patient at a time, or several specimens at a time. But there is also a way you can bulk import data. So imagine you have some 100 specimens you want to update quantity for, and you don't want that to, you don't want to enter that one by one. So what you can do is fill the data in a particular template, which we call as a comma separated value file, and upload it. So this is the bulk import feature. And in this, we have added a new import type, which is called as update else create. So what this would do is, so let's take example of participant registration. So you have a file which has 100 patients, and you're registering those patients to a particular protocol. Now, in those 100 patients, imagine that 25 patients are already present in your protocol, and you don't know that because it might be you're getting that file from somewhere and you're just uploading that information. So now in this case, if you use this operation, what it would do is it will update those 25 participants, and for the rest of the 75 participants which are not existing, it will create. So that is what this would do. So it's kind of doing both update as well as create in the same operation for your file that you're uploading. And if you use create, what would happen is those 25 records will fail, because you're trying to create something which is already existing. So that is the difference between this create and update else create. So update and else create, just to clarify, what it does is it checks your records based on the unique feed. For example, in patient, it checks that PPID or the patient ID. If it exists, then it just updates based on whatever values you have entered in that particular record. Or if it's a new PPID or patient ID, then it will create that patient. So this is kind of merging both operations in the same bulk import. So that is this feature. So this was specifically asked by one of our clients who frequently does data imports using bulk imports, and that data is coming from some offline or off-site locations where they don't know whether that data already exists. So they were finding it difficult to separate out the files for update versus create. So we merged it into one operation now. Yeah. So please do use the chat window if you have any questions. We have our colleagues who can answer right away, or we'll take up the questions at the end of the session. Yeah. And of course, other than these, in 8.2, we made a lot of bug fixes and improvements. And as I said, we on our Confluence, so this is our help manuals and other documentation that is available on our Confluence, and you can access this using help.openspecimen.org. And one of the sections is the release notes. So we have release notes for all the versions. So if you see on this left hand side, starting from 2.x to 9.0. So if you see here for 8.2, we have all these here. And whatever we talked about today, and in additionally, there are other enhancements, minor enhancements, all of that are documented over here. So you can take a look at this if you are interested to see specific features. So that's the 8.2, and 8.2, as I said, was mainly done for the security fixes, because those were some urgent fixes that were asked by some of the clients, and we had to make those releases. 9.0, as I said, is the most recent release. We did about a couple of weeks ago, and one of the main highlight of 9.0 is the workflows plugin. This was specifically done for the two new clients we are working for in Netherlands. In fact, we are right now in Netherlands to meet, have some workshops and meetings with the new clients, and they are UMC Utrecht and UMC Amsterdam. And both of these had this particular use case where they are very high throughput biobanks, and the samples they get in, they have specific SOPs for every type of sample that needs to be processed. And these SOPs has to be built into OpenSpecimen, where every step of the processing, they need to enter whether they followed the specific SOP. and if there were deviations or anything different than what is in the template of the SOP, they have to document it. So to make those easier, so we created this plugin called Workflows, which helps in creating different kinds of SOPs and following those specimen processing steps. So and how this can be done is, it is kind of like in a kind of widget where you can do next and go to every task in the workflows in a easy to use navigation. So we look at some example workflows. So first example is when they receive heparin tubes, what are they supposed to do? So every step of the heparin processing is kind of programmed into OpenSpecimen using the workflows module. So now when they receive the heparin tubes, they at the lab, they pool those blood samples. So suppose for example, for every patient, if they receive 2 heparin tubes, they pool those and then they do fecal isolation. If there are more blood than expected or less number of blood, so based on that they decide whether they want to pool specimen again. And finally they'll do a cell count and create PBMC samples. And all these samples are pre-barcoded, so they want to barcode the aliquot tubes finally. So this is just an example processing SOP that I'm going to show. But similar to this, you can create any kind of workflows like tissue processing, serum processing, plasma EDTA tube processing. So every kind of tube or specimen that you receive has a specific set of steps that you need to perform, right? And in the current OpenSpecimen, if you have to do all this, these are all separate steps. Like, you need to receive specimens using a different menu item. Then you need to collect the specimens. Then you need, of course, there is no pooling specimens in the previous version, but we have added this as a feature. So what workflows allows you to do is all this, you can do like a step-by-step procedure that rather than going into different menu items, there are more number of clicks in the older version. So we'll look at this example now. Yeah. So for the workflows module, sorry, let me go to the test server for that. For the workflows module, we have a separate menu item that you see here. And this is our test server. This is right now not on a demo site. We'll add that soon. So here, first let me go here. So as the first step is, as an administrator, I can upload all these workflows. So as you see, there is serum processing, heparin processing, tissue processing. So there are different workflows like this. Now, first thing is, it also shows me how many different batches are going on in each of these workflows. Now let me go inside the heparin processing. So as I said, these are different batches started by different users. Now I'll go to something called as the waiting queue. Yeah. So the waiting queue is created based on the different rules. So let me first select the heparin processing and show it to you. Yeah. So here, if you see, there are some specimens already waiting for heparin processing. So this is done based on different rules that has been set on the the workflow. So I can say that whenever a sample is received in a lab for a particular protocol or a particular type of tube type or a specimen type, then this has to come in the queue for heparin processing. So you don't really have to even scan the samples. You can, but the system can decide, based on certain parameters of the specimen, that these are pending for this workflow. So now what I'll do is, okay, I have received these 4 samples today. I'm going to select that and start the workflow. So this is the workflow processing screen. So as a tissue banker, so today I received 4 heparin tubes from patient v29. But of course, you can also do this for multiple patients at a time. So, and as you see, at each step of the workflow, you can define a lot of things. The first thing is, you can define what fields you want to enter for each step. Then you can have a description. So if you see, it says that, what points to consider for each of the steps. Then it shows you an overview of the specimens as well. We'll come back to that later. So now I have received all these specimens as per my, whatever I've defined in the template. So I'm just going to submit this. So as I complete each step, you see that there's a green mark over here. So this is kind of on the left-hand side, the overview of all the steps I need to follow for a particular workflow. And for every workflow on the right side, what data I want to enter, that is shown here. So the next step is I need to pool the samples. So I'm going to pool first 2 samples, then I'm going to pool the second, third and fourth sample. Yeah, so and if I want to print labels, that is also an option that I have. Then I'll say submit. So now I have finished the second step. So if I want to, exit this at this point, because for fecal isolation I might be going somewhere else, or maybe some other user in the lab is going to continue this workflow, you can exit this and come back to this batch at any point of time. And now I'll see what is the description. So there's no description here. So and enter the date and time and submit this. So again, I'm going to pool the sample if I want, but at this point I decided that I don't have, I have enough pooled samples, so I'm going to skip this step. So you have an option to skip a particular step, and if you're skipping, it's going to ask you for confirmation, and I need to put a reason. So not enough blood. So I'm just going to submit this. So when you skip a step, if you see there is a cross mark, so it will indicate that this workflow did not happen. And if I now go into the specimens, it will show me the samples that were added. And if I go open that specimen, it will open it in a different tab. Let me show you in the visit for. So if you see here, these are the pooled sample. That's why it's indicated in pink. And these were the samples that I received, the heparin tubes. Yeah, and if I go inside, it will show me all the collected, received, whatever I entered in the as part of the workflow, they're all added at the specimen level. So now the next step is I'm deriving PBMCs and entering the cell counts. So I'm just going to enter some of them here and submit. Then I can create aliquots. So as you see, each task in workflow can be of different types. It can be creation of aliquots, which is like an action. It can be events. It can be form data entry. So you can include any fields, any kind of actions as part of the, every task of this workflow. Now, as the last few steps, so what I'm doing is I'm going to create PBMCs. Then I can scan the barcodes for each of the aliquots if I want. So now if I go inside the specimen, so you remember there were only heparin tubes that were parent samples. Now it has created the derived PBMCs and the aliquots as well. So this is one example of the workflow. As I said, so this holds all the steps that you see here and the data related to these steps, they were all part of the workflow. So you don't have to go to multiple screens, and you can do for this for multiple samples of different patients at once. Before I go into another example, I'll just yeah yeah, so I'll just stop for some questions now, because this is one of the big features that we have added. So one of the question is, can multiple users work on the same batch, or can a user resume where a previous user stopped? Yes, you can do that. So you can exit a particular batch at any point of time, and any user that who can access that workflow, they can come and resume that particular task. So workflow is can be assigned to a group of users, and any user in that group can continue a batch. So that is how it works. There is another question, can a workflow be, how is workflow configured? Yes, it is configured by admins, and you can, by default, super admins have access to workflows. But when you create users, so let me just quickly show you that. So when you create users, similar to how you have managed forms, you also have managed workflows. So you can give this additionally to other users. So to add new workflows, and yes, it is using JSON files. Can you add custom fields to the pages within each step of the workflows? Yes. So you can add any field of specimen visit, including custom fields. Even custom forms can be added as part of the workflow. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, coming back to the workflow. So the another feature is you can also download like a manifest, and this manifest can be configured the way you need it. Let me just show you an example of it. So this is like a collection manifest where you can have like barcodes of the specimens. You can have a table of overview of the specimen. So something like if you have like an order form for every visit, you can have such manifest also. And this is not just part of workflow. This manifest is now available even on the normal collection pages that you can configure. And the manifest, the format of the manifest can be configured at protocol level. So this was one example. Let me just highlight the features of workflows. As I said, workflows can have multiple tasks. Each task can collect different data, and you can define description per task. Then per task, you can also record deviations, or you can even skip a particular task. And overall, the whole workflow can have an SOP as well. Let me show you an example of that. I go back to workflows. This has, yeah. So here, if you see this particular workflow on the whole workflow has SOP, and you can also have links. Suppose your internal website or intranet has workflow, the SOP documents, you can link it to that as well. So in general, you can have description for each task like this, or you can have description for the overall workflow as well. And finally, you can print labels, specimen labels in between the workflow, like at every task. You can define if you want to print labels, or you can print a manifest for, as I showed to you. So just to give you one more example. So this is a serum processing workflow. So again, you receive specimens at the lab, you rest the blood tube for 60 minutes, spin the tube for 10 minutes at a specific speed, and finally process the aliquots. So let me just show you an example of that. Yeah. Yeah, so here if I go inside one of the serum processing, so here if you see, we can receive the specimens, then rest the specimen for a certain period of time. You can centrifuge it, and finally you can create the serum aliquots and even store them. So when you store the specimens, even you have an option to auto-allocate the specimens, and when you want to freeze, you can enter the freeze date and time. So all these, as I said, the steps, the description, the title of the each workflow task step, everything can be defined as part of the workflow. Yeah. Any other questions on the workflows? Okay, so that was the workflow feature. And as I said, so if you have multiple workflows for a particular protocol, you can define rules so that the specimens automatically get assigned to the workflows. So imagine in your protocol, you're collecting heparin tube and EDTA tube. So there are two different workflows. So you can define saying that if heparin tubes are received in the lab, then they should be automatically assigned to heparin processing workflow. So they appear on the waiting queue automatically, and you also, the users who are assigned to that workflow, they get a daily email notification, specifying what got added in the queue today. Yeah. And as I said, you can assign specific tasks within the workflow to users. So sometimes what happens is, you receive heparin tubes, you do some processing in one lab, and then you might be sending for cell count and cell processing in a different lab. So you can assign individual tasks within the workflow to specific user groups. So only those users can log in and resume that particular workflow. They can see waiting list, as I already mentioned. So those were the features, and since this is as part of 9.0, yeah, so whatever the workflow is implemented is the first version, but we are still working on new features and adding new things to that. So that was workflows feature. So the next feature is the collection protocol revision. So what this would allow you to do is, whenever you do any changes to the collection protocol, the collection protocol is moved as a draft version. Of course, this is an optional feature. If you can, using the settings, you can change whether you want to enable or disable that. So let me just show you. So in settings, if you go to revisions, so there is CP revisions, you can enable or disable that. So let's on the demo site, I have enabled it. So what I'll do is I'll go to a collection protocol. So for example, let me go inside this, and suppose I made some change here. So I added a start date and end date and updated it. So if you see, as soon as I made any change to the protocol, I get this draft that is written here, and this would appear on all the pages specific to this protocol. So now if I go to the, say, participant page, if I go inside a participant, wherever I go, I'll see this draft. So the users will know that there has been some change to the protocol and it is yet to be reviewed. So now, and also the protocol users get a notification. So now when I go to view CP details, I have an option to publish this. So I can publish, I can say summary of changes. And who reviewed it, and so on, and I can publish it. And as soon as I publish it, the draft stops appearing, and I can see all the revisions. I can review it in this tab. So any revisions that happen to this particular protocol, they can be reviewed over here. You can download revisions, view the revision details. So whatever I added when I'm publishing, they're all available here. So this is, as I said, if you don't want this feature, you can disable it, or you can enable at the setting level. And as I said, this is more useful for regulatory compliances, where you want to make sure that every protocol edit has to be reviewed and before it has been used, and so on. When the protocol is in draft, it doesn't mean that you cannot do any data entry. You can still continue to do data entry, just that the draft appears on all pages specific to that protocol. Yeah, any questions on that? Can this feature be specific to certain users? Of course, the publishing the protocol changes or editing the protocol, it is specific to certain users. Only specific admins can do it. But the draft appearing will be appearing for all users, even for the data entry users. Any other questions? What happens to specimen data accession into the protocol while so there is so as I said, while doing data entry, nothing is affected when the protocol is in draft mode. The users will know that it is in draft, so it just shows that draft coloring watermark on all the pages, but you can still continue to do data entry. Okay, any other questions? Actually, I'm not sure about this question. I need to get back about this. I think not. These are more for the protocol changes, but not the JSON file changes. I'll need to get back on that. There's another question. If is the workflows feature paid or free? It is paid. The workflows is a plugin, separate plugin, which you need to purchase. Okay. So the next feature is pool specimens. Again, this was, as I said, as part of the workflow features, this was a comment given by UMC Utrecht, where they, for lot of their SOPs, they want to pool specimens. But this is not just part of workflow. This is now a generic feature where you can use pool specimen as a feature. What this will allow you to do is merge multiple specimens, and usually this might be applicable for blood samples or fluid samples, where if you are getting the samples in smaller tubes, you might be merging them into a bigger tube before you spin down into aliquots. So you can now use that feature. And so now, for example, if I go into any of the patients over here, it is going to already existing specimens. Yeah. So here, don't have a good use this, and you have this option to pool. So you can pool them like this. As I said, this is part of wherever you see list of specimens and action button, you will be able to select multiple specimens and pool them. And once you pool them, you can specify if it is creating a different type and all those. Let me just. Yeah. And once you've created, you'll see that these aliquots got closed and there's a pooled sample that got created, and that is now stored in a location. And the pooled specimen will show it was pooled, and from what specimens they were pooled, it is shown over here. And even if I go inside the parent tube, or the it will show that it has been pooled into a specific tube. So you have an option to do that. And this can be, as I said, pool specimen also can be part of the main workflow steps as well. Yeah. So any questions on that? So there is a question about workflow again, if it is paid for testing environment also. Yes. So what you could do is you can, as I said, you can use our demo site for testing the workflow feature. And yeah, so we will take up some of the workflow questions offline or a bit later. So the next feature is the database console. So in OpenSpecimen user interface, now you will be able to do certain database operations like select, insert, update. Again, this is only available for super admins, and it is more for things like debugging database problems. For example, the system is slow, and there was some big query that was executed, and somebody has reported a problem, and the database administrators or us, we have to debug the problem. We can easily do it now through the user interface. And there is also where if you want to reset label token sequences, right now we have to go to the database and do it. So you can do that as well using the database console. So what you need to do is go into extras. Again, as I said, this is available only for super admins, and we always put a caution that even if it is available only for super admins, use it with a lot of caution, as any kind of database updates, you have to do it very carefully. So now what you need to do is, after you go in here, you select this. As you see, you get also a warning. Then you say agree. and I'll say for demo purpose, say next. So you get a OTP, again additional security that you have to confirm. Let me just So here it's something like if you have used the database console, you can just put any kind of SQL like here. So I've just put a small, and you can execute like this. So this can be used for, if you want to just run some select statements, or even, as I said, debugging DB problems or small insert or update statements. You can do that instead of going into the database server and doing it. And it's only available for super admins. Yeah. So that's the database console as such. And there is also another feature that is that has been added, that is backup job, where you can take database and data folder backup. What this will allow you to do is start a backup from the interface, and this will avoid any external scripts and so on. You can also schedule these backups. Let me show you that. So again, this is available only for super admins. You go to extras and there is this backups. So if you see, it will show the older backups that have been taken, and you can do a backup. So maybe you're before upgrade we usually take backups, so we can do this here. Or you're running some big bulk import and you want to back up the database before that, you can do that. And we all again this also we recommend that you do it during off-peak hours. So again, that's why it is only available for super admin. So again, you use it again with caution, only when it's needed. So that those were the two things that have been added to extras and only for super admins, which is related to the database. The next feature is specimen centric collection protocol enhancement. This was done for a new group in Columbia University, where they have specimen centric protocols, but within that they have planned specimens. So even though it's not a participant centric protocol, the specimens that they collect is per protocol is known in advance. So they want to define the requirements in specimen centric protocols. So this was not there before, but now if you go to say any specimen centric protocol, so for example this one, so here this requirements tab was not there in the previous version. Now you have this, where you can define any kind of, so for example, I know that for this particular protocol I'm always going to collect 1 tube of EDTA blood, which is 10 ml. So I can define that as part of my protocol itself now. Yeah, so this is specifically for specimen centric protocol. Of course, in participant centric this feature is already there, and you can even define aliquots, derivative, multiple requirements. So you can add now. So now once this is added, so let me just add and show you how the data entry will work. Yeah, so you have now defined this. Now when I go to data entry for the specimen centric protocol now, the first step when I add specimen, it is going to ask me whether I want to create based on the requirement that I added or unplanned specimen. So when I say add it based on this, it will automatically put all the other details, and I can also create child based on it. And if you see here, all these are pre-populated. So this is like the planned specimen page that comes up. So for this is how the specimen centric protocol also can have now the requirements defined, and because of which you can now also set up auto allocation based on specimen requirements. So suppose you define imagine that out of these 3 aliquots, I put 2 aliquots in one freezer and 1 in another freezer. So all this you will not be able to define in the previous version because you can't put SR codes and so on. So that is now possible because you can define specimen requirements at specimen in specimen centric protocols. Yeah. So those were the features of 9.0. As I said, we recently released that. And even for 9.0, if you go to the release notes, so you have all the details over here. Yeah. So now we can take up questions. So there is a question, is it only just the backup for the entire database, or can you restore from the backup files without help of the system team? No, for restoration, you still have to contact the system teams or us. The backup file would be created on the server, and that can be used for restoration. But of course, for doing that, you'll still have to contact us. Yes, it would be the database dump file, and not just the database. As you know, if you upload any files like consent files, SPR files, they are all on the app server in the data folder. Even that is backed up as a zip file. So that can also be used for restoration. Yes, the backup is standard MySQL dump format with all the things that are required, like, if there are any views or any triggers, everything are backed up within that file. There is a question, can the values be changed? Was that related to the, now let me unmute. If you want to unmute yourself and ask the question, that's also fine. So yeah, so if the question was related to the requirement that is defined at the specimen centric protocol, if the values can be changed when you actually collect the specimens, yes, whatever you define at the requirement, you can change the values when you actually collect the specimens. Can we download the backup files? No, that cannot be downloaded from the UI. It is just for backup. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so that's it on today's webinar then. Thanks everyone for joining. Does the database console show the schema? No, it does not show, but we do have a separate a schema page. We'll share the link. Yeah, so Shri just shared that link. So we have that updated for every version. Okay, thanks everyone for joining. So we'll share the recording.